Okay, so I've had an opportunity to put about 150 miles on this 2022 F150 XLT Sport Package two-wheel drive truck with the 2.7 liter Ecoboost engine, and I really think it's time that I can give you my honest driving impressions on this vehicle. Yeah, it's been a really cool vehicle, and what you can obviously see right now is that it's raining pretty hard, and I've been driving through some pretty nasty weather here for the last 45 minutes. That said, it handles it really well. The one thing that a lot of folks like about pickup trucks is that confidence that it gives you, sitting a little higher up than some of the other vehicles and feeling as if you're in something a little bit more substantial. For me, I get that feeling. I certainly get it out of my F450, but I also get it out of cars sometimes. So you guys may remember, prior to the Ford Explorer that we just recently purchased, and this of course is a loaner vehicle if you didn't know, the Fusion we had was a great vehicle. But one of the challenges I'm not going to say challenge, one of the issues that I had was when you're driving through really inclement weather, I mean heavy downpour, you don't want to feel like you're the smallest thing out there. And the Fusion certainly felt small. It felt light. I didn't feel unsafe per se, but at times you just kind of felt as if you should be in something a little bit more substantial going through this type of weather. Now, all that said, the difference in terms of feel between the three vehicles that I've, of course, recently had the opportunity of driving, my Ford Fusion, the Ford Explorer, and this truck, I'm going to be honest with you, this truck feels better than the other two vehicles. Now, depending on what type of terrain you're driving over or road conditions, the other vehicles are going to feel smoother at times. But on highway driving, it's really crazy to think that a pickup truck feels smoother over this type of road surface than both the Fusion and the Explorer do. And even when you go over these expansion joints, you barely feel them. I'm not going to say that they're that much more noticeable in an Explorer or the Fusion, but those vehicles certainly feel lighter, and they don't feel as, I guess, connected to the ground as this truck, which is very odd because, typically you feel you'd have to go to a car with that type of suspension to be able to truly, have a better driving experience. But the manufacturers of all of these half-ton trucks have come such a long way in terms of refining the ride over all sorts of different types of conditions, especially if you're going over just a smooth road. Now, that said, this is not the smoothest half-ton pickup truck I've ridden in. That award would still have to go to Ram, especially with the limited truck I drove that had the air suspension. But even without the air suspension, that four-wheel coil suspension is plush. It is absolutely the smoothest riding half-ton truck I think you can buy on the market. And anybody who owns a, higher trim level Ram could probably attest to that. Now, even their lower trim levels, I still feel, are really great riding vehicles. This truck, in my opinion, isn't what I would consider to be like a super close number 2 or second. I do believe that it is closest to the Ram in terms of ride versus, a GMC or Chevrolet Silverado, or a Sierra versus Silverado. Both of those trucks definitely lean more towards the firm ride. And when I say firm, the best way I could probably compare it is General Motors trucks, Chevy and GMC, are more like a BMW, whereas this is going to feel more like maybe a Mercedes, and then you move to more of a Lexus type ride with a Ram, because the Ram feels utterly like you're floating over the road. And even on some really rough roads that normally would washboard you to death, the Ram still feels better. But if you are looking for that type of a ride and you're getting into something like a Ram, the one thing you would want to keep in mind is that because of that softer suspension, it tends to squat more under load. So you hook a big heavy trailer to the back of it, you load the bed full of stuff, it's certainly going to feel and look more squatted down, unless you get it with like the air suspension so you can raise it back up. Ford, with this truck, is going to have less of that squat, and it's going to seem as if it's handling the payload a little better. And that's kind of the trade-off, is that you have, one ride that's super plush and comfy, but it may not feel as if it handles payload as well as this truck, which has a firmer ride A little bit rougher in the back. Front end still very soft, but it's going to feel and appear to handle payload better. All of that said, though, you know, if you look at the rear suspension on here, it's a very interesting rear suspension. It has one single leaf spring above a real thick overload leaf. And I don't want to really call this a 2 leaf spring pack per side, because 2 leaf springs generally means you have 2 full extended length leaf springs. And this one really only has one really thin leaf spring that extends across the back, which is, again, is interesting because a lot of half-ton trucks still have 2 leaf springs on each side, at least. Some have 3. And for this truck to have 1 on each side, it's fine. I've never really heard of a half-ton pickup truck under normal use breaking a leaf spring unless you've been in some type of an accident or you've just overloaded the heck out of it. You know, you see RVs all the time that break leaf springs. I think the quality of a pickup truck leaf spring is probably superior to that of a trailer or an RV. But, you know, having a single leaf spring on each side kind of raises the question, what would happen if a leaf spring were to break? And if you only have one spring there, the whole suspension would likely collapse on that side of the vehicle. So that's kind of a scary thought. Don't think it would ever happen, but it's just something that you think about when you're, you know, technically minded and you look at it. That said, you look at something like a Ram with the coil spring, you can run into the same thing, right? A coil spring fails or breaks. It's one single stretch of spring. If that piece breaks, it's going to collapse in on itself. So, you know, again, I have never heard of pickup trucks under normal use ever experiencing that. I'm sure you guys probably have some story of it happening at some point. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know if that's something that has occurred. But overall, you know, driving this truck is very comfortable. Cloth seats, you know, sometimes you almost prefer a cloth or upholstered interior versus a leather interior, because I think some folks have that more cushioned couch feeling in a truck with cloth seats versus leather. So I can definitely attest to that. I can see how some people would prefer that, because at times I actually prefer that. Also, you know, in a truck like this, in this XLT package with cloth seats, you have a lot of really cool technology. You have a huge screen, you have really nice infotainment system up front, but one thing that's lacking is some of that additional technology you kind of wish you had, such as the navigation system. There's no navigation in here, even though they give you this massive, massive screen. I think it's like a 12-inch screen. On top of that, you know, you have, again, this really, really great screen, but another challenge you kind of have is that it's a lot to navigate when you're driving. It's a lot of buttons to find, and some of the buttons kind of bleed in terms of, they don't look like really defined touchscreen buttons like you might see on your smartphone. You know, there's a lot of really great technology in this truck, though. XLT coming with LED lights. The lighting in this truck is absolutely phenomenal when you're driving down the road. It really, really casts a great light pattern out on the road, and that is really nice. All of your steering wheel controls are really nice. Everything's placed in a good position. The shifter on this truck is kind of an interesting thing, because, you know, a lot of trucks have moved to a rotary dial or push button shifting. This truck still has an actual column or a center console shifter, but you kind of have to understand that it's purely electric at this point, that it's the same as a rotary shifter where you have to turn a knob, because in reality, it's not really connected to anything. It's plugged in. So, you know, whenever you see some of the shifters in these newer vehicles, in some ways it could just be cosmetic. And in this truck, because it's like that, it takes up a larger footprint than if it were just a basic rotary knob. So that's something to think about. Air conditioning in this truck works absolutely great. Just overall, this truck is a great package. It is missing some technology features that you might normally want to have, or you might just say, you know what, why doesn't it have that one extra feature? But again, at the price point that this truck is designed to play at, it's really designed to give you everything you would want and not necessarily anything you don't need. So a lot of cool aspects to this truck. It rides really nice, has a really compliant ride. And the engine noise is so quiet. For a 2.7 liter small turbocharged V6, this thing is just insanely quiet and super powerful. I mean, if I hit the gas, it just takes off like a rocket. Really nice. But yeah, I'm gonna have it for you know, several more days, so I'll give you more driving impressions as I drive this truck around and let you know what I think about it. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and we will talk to you again very soon.